What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. So I'm going to go over 5 wide receivers that I think have league winning upside this season. These are not necessarily guys that I'm projecting to be league winners, but guys that I think do have that upside. And some of these guys I actually am projecting to have true breakout seasons, but they're definitely guys that I'm targeting in drafts quite often as guys that I really think could help take your teams over the top. So this will be my first video in terms of league winners. Up next, I'll be giving you guys a running back, tight end, and quarterback video of the same sort of genre here, and then I'll follow it up with draft busts and then maybe some sleepers as well as some general draft strategy as well. So getting into the offseason a little bit thicker, so going to be a lot of videos coming up in the near future. Going to be really busy up the next couple months before we get into draft season. So super exciting. I love making these videos. Quick reminder, I just want to let you guys all know that my projections and rankings are up on my website at www.realsteelffb.com. So if you haven't taken a look at those, they're for free. So if you want that information, feel free to go take a look. It might be really useful for you. If there's any questions you have, any disagreements, please let me know. I'd love to take a look at that and see if maybe I can make them a little bit better. So yeah, thank you guys for stopping by. And yeah, let's get into the first player here. Starting us off here is I have Chris Olave. He's got a consensus ADP of wide receiver 14, which just for me is way too low. I truly believe that he's got top 5 wide receiver upside. Derek Carr is a very significant upgrade at the quarterback position compared to what he had in Jameis Winston and Andy Dalton last year. Reports out of camp are just glowing about Chris Olave, stating that he's very clearly taken that year 2 leap that we often see wide receivers do. So it's extremely reasonable to assume that Olave is going to improve from a talent perspective from what he did put together last year. And on top of that, he's definitely got a better quarterback situation. In general, the wide receiver room is not very competitive for him. There's Michael Thomas, obviously, who hasn't played meaningful football in like 2 or 3 years. I like Rashid Shaheed as a nice deep threat, but he's not going to be a true target hog at all in this offense. There's going to be limited pass catching from the running backs, especially with Alvin Kamara potentially getting suspended for a chunk of time. So, in general, this offense is going to run through Chris Olave. We've seen Derek Carr be more than willing to target his main guy. He's done it with Darren Waller and Hunter Renfrow for years, but in the past, and they definitely did it with Devontae Adams last season. I don't think Chris Olave is quite up to Devontae Adams' talent level, but he's far and away the best wide receiver on this roster. This is going to be a team that has to throw the ball. They're not going to be a very good team in general. They're going to have to put up points, and Chris Olave is certainly good enough to do that. I think it's really reasonable to assume that Chris Olave could be a top 5 wide receiver. I'm projecting him to be my wide receiver 8, but his style of play lends itself to a bit of a boomer bust given how explosive he is down the field. There's going to be plenty of really spike weeks where Chris Olave might even be the wide receiver 1 on many different weeks this season. I'm in love with Chris Olave, especially given that you can draft him as your wide receiver 2. I'm more than comfortable leaving draft with him as my wide receiver 1, and I've just been grabbing him everywhere. So even though the ADP is pretty high here, I think he could be an absolute league winner this season. Up next here, we've got Quentin Johnston. He's being drafted as the wide receiver 50. He is a rookie wide receiver drafted in the first round by the Los Angeles Chargers. And honestly, he's got legitimate top 20 wide receiver upside, especially if Mike Williams or Keenan Allen get hurt, which imagine that, it couldn't possibly happen. But all jokes aside, it's very reasonable to assume there's going to be an injury at some point to this Chargers offense, and even if there's not, they're going to find ways to get Quentin Johnston on the field. The Chargers ran a lot of 3 wide receiver sets last season. They're going to continue to do that again. This is going to be an extremely pass-heavy offense. They're run by Kellen Moore now, who's really demonstrated a desire to pass the ball as much as possible, and they've got the weapons to do it. So this could very easily be a team that leads the NFL in passing yards and pass attempts this season. And on top of that, Justin Herbert's good enough to potentially put up honestly like a fantasy breaking season. I wouldn't be shocked at all to see Herbert put up 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns. Obviously, that's on the top end of the spectrum here, but it's within the range of outcomes. And if he does that, Quentin Johnston, especially with the kind of build he has, could easily put up a double-digit touchdown season with 1,000 yards, even in his rookie year. And if there were to be an injury to Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, especially Mike Williams, who I think he would fill that role a little bit better, there's just the sky's the limit for this kid. He's super talented. If he can acclimate quickly, he could definitely get off to a good start here. And being that he can get had at wide receiver 50, you're drafting him as your wide receiver 5 for your roster, and I think he's got legitimate league-winning upside. So he's a guy that I've been drafting a ton of just because he's super cheap, and I love the upside, and I want as many pieces of this Chargers offense as possible. Up next here, we've got Jameson Williams. He's got an ADP currently of wide receiver 46, and to me that's just extremely low given the upside you're getting with Jameson Williams. I understand that the hit rate on wide receivers who don't necessarily perform in their first year is relatively low, but the Lions drafted Williams knowing that he wasn't going to be a meaningful contributor last season. They held him out for about 3/4 of the season, and he came back and really didn't do much, just sort of try to get acclimated, and now he's going to be suspended for 6 games, so that's obviously not optimal given what you're looking for out of a wide receiver here. You're not going to be able to use your IR slot. I think that's pushing his ADP down just a little bit too low. There's really no target competition outside of Amon-Ra St. Brown on this Lions offense. They lost DJ Chark. They added Marvin Jones. I don't think that really makes up for the loss of Chark, and they also lost Hawkinson mid last season. This is going to be an offense that's going to throw the ball a lot to Amon-Ra and Jahmyr Gibbs, but they don't really have a true downfield threat until Jameson Williams comes back. So Jameson Williams is going to fill a role that this offense absolutely needs. He's going to be a field stretcher for them, and he's super talented. And this is going to be an offense, again, that's going to have to score a lot of points. The Lions defense is probably going to be near the bottom of the league again this season. They're going to have to score a ton of points, and Jameson Williams is good enough to do that. So if he's actually as talented as his draft capital suggests, he was a top 10 pick, I believe, just last season. He's got a ton of talent. I personally think he's going to be a really great receiver in the NFL, and if he can do that, I think he's still going to be the wide receiver 2 for this team, but that's just because I truly love Amon-Ra, the talent, as well. I think there's going to be very many weeks this season where Jameson Williams posts top 10 wide receiver upside, and he's going to be pretty boomer bust, but that's definitely what you're looking for at your wide receiver 4. He's going to have some really high upside every single week, and he's going to be a guy that you could play matchups with and could easily end up inside the top 20. So given how cheap he is, I love drafting Jameson Williams this season. Next up, sort of breaking the mold here in terms of guys who aren't as boom or bust, I've got Rondale Moore. I have him ranked as my wide receiver 29 despite an ADP of wide receiver 57, and he was quietly breaking out last season over a 6-game stretch from weeks 5 to 10. He was the wide receiver 12, putting up just over 15 fantasy points per game, and then he left in week 11 with an injury. I ended up scoring negative 0.6 fantasy points, and I think that a lot of people are really just ignoring that he was breaking out and becoming a pretty integral part of the Cardinals offense. Rondale Moore is basically free in drafts right now. You're getting him in the 13th, 14th round, and he's got a real shot at wide receiver 2 value, especially if Kyler Murray comes back healthy earlier on in the season. This offense could be quietly maybe not a bottom 10 offense, which, given how I have them projected, would be a very beneficial boost to this offense. He's also got a pretty safe floor given the role he plays in this offense. He's going to be the slot receiver here. The outside receivers will be Marquise Brown and probably Michael Wilson, their rookie out of the third round. There's going to be a lot of manufactured touches for Rondale Moore. He's going to catch a lot of screen passes. So he's going to have a pretty safe floor, and if he actually has enough talent to evolve into a really useful member of this offense, this could be a guy that ends up being a wide receiver 25 to 30, maybe even a little bit higher. And if that's the case, you're getting him for free, and it's going to be a guy that you can use every single week, especially in PPR formats. And those are the kind of guys that can really help you make the playoffs and make a push deep into the playoffs because they're just such a positional advantage given that you didn't spend anything on them. So he doesn't really have that top 10 upside. He doesn't even really have top 15 upside, but he could easily be a top 25 wide receiver, and you don't have to pay that at all. So I love drafting Rondale Moore late in drafts this season. Up next here, and this is the last receiver I've got is Kadarius Toney. I only have him ranked as my wide receiver 27, which is just 10 spots ahead of ADP. He's being drafted as the wide receiver 37, but he had a 29% target rate last season, which is extremely high. And I think we all know that if Kadarius Toney's on the field and healthy, he gets a lot of looks, and he's a very efficient player. He does a lot with those looks. So just changing my projection to a 25% target share, which I don't think is exactly unreasonable if he could be a healthy wide receiver 1 for this team. Obviously, he'll be the second option in this pecking order behind Travis Kelce, but giving him a 25% target share would bump him up in my projection all the way to wide receiver 9, and I think that is very much within the range of outcomes for this kid. I don't think he's going to finish as the wide receiver 9 by any means because he's likely going to miss a handful of games this season because his hamstrings don't seem to be able to hold up. He might end up just being a gadget player, but despite the obvious health and usage concerns, there's just so much upside for a player that I think has a ton of talent. And given the offense he's a part of, if he can maintain a wide receiver 1 role in this offense, there's certainly a world where he ends up finishing the season as a wide receiver 1, and you don't have to pay that much for him at all, especially if you're in a draft where you have already got 3 or 4 wide receivers that you like and you don't necessarily need Kadarius Toney, because Kadarius Toney could easily bust. He could easily be a wide receiver that plays 4 games this season. He could do absolutely nothing. He could get buried on the depth chart, and we'd be forgetting about him after this year. But it's also possible that he puts up a breakout season and actually puts a stranglehold as the wide receiver 1 in this offense. And if that happens, you're going to be kicking yourself for passing up on the opportunity to draft him. So if you don't need him to perform for your roster to make it, then I love drafting him. But I swear, if you go pretty RB heavy earlier on in drafts, I find myself straying away from him because I don't want to take on that much risk with a receiver that I'm going to need to start from week 1 on. So that'll do it for this video of my 5 league-winning wide receivers. Up next, I'll be bringing you guys a video of 5 league-winning running backs. I'll get that one up for you guys on Saturday. It's been super fun making these videos. I'll get 4 videos out, one with wide receivers, then running backs, tight ends, and quarterbacks. And then I'll get on to some sleepers, some busts, and then I'll move on to draft strategy as well. So if there's any videos that I haven't done or any other sort of content you guys want, feel free to let me know in the comments. I'm happy to sort of try and please you guys and see what we can get there. If this is your first time watching this videos, please do take a minute to like the video. If you got anything out of it, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're somewhere around 340. I'd love to keep getting that number up. It's shoot for 1,000 by the end of the season. Probably won't happen, but let's see what we can do there. It's a fun goal to have. We can see if we can make it. So thank you guys so much for all the support, and I'll catch you next time.